The Child Nutrition and WIC, Women, Infants, and Children Reauthorization Act of 2004 requires school food authorities to develop and implement a food safety program based on HACCP, Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Points Principles. These food safety programs must be in place in all schools that participate in the National School Lunch and/or School Breakfast programs. For these programs to be successful, it is critical that all school nutrition employees have a thorough understanding of food safety principles and the factors related to the sanitation challenge, so they may help implement a successful food safety program. What is sanitation? Regarding food, sanitation refers to the hygienic measures for ensuring food safety. It is more than keeping everything looking clean, because clean does not necessarily mean sanitary. Clean means free of visible dirt. A surface could be clean, yet contaminated with disease-causing bacteria. Sanitization is the process of making or the quality of being made sanitary. For example, when we wipe off the flour and dough particles from the baker's table, we are cleaning that table. But that is just the first step in the process. Sanitizing is using a chemical to reduce the bacteria or germs on the surface to a safe level. Every day you prepare lunches for a number of students. You start with good, safe food. What you do with it in your kitchen can mean the difference between a safe lunch and one that makes hundreds of kids sick. It is up to you to prepare all the food you serve in a sanitary way. Food that is not prepared in a sanitary way can cause foodborne illness. With this lesson, you will understand the importance of managing a sanitary food service facility. After this lesson, you will be able to identify 1. Foods that can cause foodborne illnesses, and 2. The microorganisms responsible for a foodborne illness. It's important that you know the meanings of a few words and acronyms. For instance, HACCP. What is it? Let's break it down. A hazard is defined as a biological, chemical, or physical agent that is reasonably likely to cause illness or injury in the absence of its control. Hazard analysis is the process of collecting and evaluating information on hazards associated with the food under consideration to decide which are significant and must be addressed in the HACCP plan. CCP, or Critical Control Point, is a step at which control can be applied and is essential to prevent or eliminate a food safety hazard or reduce it to an acceptable level. And so, HACCP, or Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point, is a systematic approach to the identification, evaluation, and control of food safety hazards. It is a system for monitoring the food service process to reduce the risk of foodborne illness. The HACCP plan, then, is the written document which is based upon the principles of HACCP, which outlines the procedures to be followed. Once you know the hazards and the critical control points that will reduce, alleviate, or eliminate these hazards, you can make a written plan showing which steps should be followed if a hazard be identified. HACCP focuses on how food flows through the food service process from purchasing through reheating. There are a variety of potential hazards at each step. In each of these steps, we must take the appropriate precautions, known as critical control points, to prevent foodborne illness. Commonly referred to as food poisoning, a foodborne illness is a disease that is carried or transmitted to people by food. All food service operations have the potential to cause foodborne illness through errors in purchasing, receiving, storing, preparing, and serving food. Pathogens are harmful microorganisms that cause illness. There are two groups of pathogens: bacteria and viruses. Viruses are the most common cause of foodborne illness, specifically the norovirus or Norwalk type virus. There are also microorganisms that are classified as spoilage microorganisms that include two groups of fungi, molds and yeasts, which cause food to spoil and may cause illness. An outbreak is defined as an incidence of foodborne illness that involves two or more people who eat a common food. Foodborne illness is considered a major public health problem. For certain highly susceptible groups, such as the elderly, young children, pregnant women, and the immune-impaired, foodborne illnesses can be fatal. For others, foodborne illness can result in discomfort lasting several days or even longer. Food may accidentally become unsafe by contamination, which means that harmful things such as microorganisms and chemicals get into food. Of all microorganisms, bacteria are of the greatest contamination concern in a food service operation. Bacteria can get into food when it is processed, such as in a meatpacking plant that is not sanitary, or in our own food service kitchens. The bacteria can come from the food itself when it still has dirt on it, from animal waste or pest droppings, or from food service workers who do not wash their hands after using the restroom or who have infected cuts. Once bacteria get into a food, they need certain conditions and time to grow. Other items that can cause contamination are harmful chemical substances such as cleaning solutions, sanitizer or poisonous metals that are absorbed by the food from improper equipment, and physical objects such as glass or metal particles that may appear when opening cans. While almost any food can be involved in a foodborne illness outbreak, harmful bacteria grow more rapidly in certain foods. Generally, it is high-protein foods that we eat regularly that are responsible for most foodborne illnesses. Foods such as those pictured are all high-protein foods and are classified as potentially hazardous foods. They include raw meat of any kind, cooked meats, poultry, shell eggs, raw fish, shrimp, and shellfish. Any food that consists in whole or in part of milk or milk products, and cooked rice, cooked beans, baked or boiled potatoes, and other plant foods that have been heat treated, sliced melons, beans, and raw seed sprouts or synthetic ingredients, tofu, and other soy protein foods. Harmful organisms invade the food service environment in several ways. Food may contain harmful organisms when it is received. It may also be contaminated during preparation and serving. People may spread organisms from their bodies to food by touching, coughing, or sneezing. Unsanitary equipment and facilities may spread organisms to people and/or food. Disease-spreading pests such as mice and flies may be attracted to overcrowded or dirty food storage areas. Cross-contamination or recontamination can happen when harmful bacteria are transferred to safe, ready-to-eat food by human hands, equipment, utensils, and raw food. These are the three ways cross-contamination can occur. Food to food. Raw contaminated ingredients may be added to foods, or fluids from raw foods may drip into foods that receive no further cooking. A common mistake is to leave thawing meat on a top shelf in the refrigerator where it can drip down onto prepared foods stored below. Hand to food. Bacteria are found throughout the body, in the hair, on the skin, in clothing, in the mouth, nose, and throat, in the intestinal tract, and on scabs or scars from skin wounds. These bacteria often end up on the hands where they can easily spread to food. Equipment to food. Bacteria can pass from equipment to food when equipment has touched contaminated food is then used to prepare other foods without proper cleaning and sanitizing. For instance, a can opener or food slicer may become a source of cross-contamination if not properly sanitized between use. In its 2011 report, the Center for Disease Control, CDC, estimates that each year roughly 1 in 6 Americans, or 48 million people, get sick. 128,000 are hospitalized, and 3,000 die of foodborne diseases. 31 pathogens are known to cause foodborne illness. These account for 20% of the annual number of illnesses, 44% of the number of annual hospitalizations, and 44% of the annual number of deaths. The other 80% of illnesses, 56% of hospitalizations, and 56% of deaths are caused by unspecified agents. 1. Those with insufficient data to estimate. 2. Known agents not yet identified as causing foodborne illness. And 3. Microbes, chemicals, or other substances known to be in food whose ability to cause illness is unproven. 8 known pathogens account for 91% of illnesses, 88% of hospitalizations, and 88% of deaths each year. These 8 are shown on this chart. Note that norovirus, salmonella, and Campylobacter spp are found in all 3 lists. 7 of these will be discussed in an upcoming slide. Note, because Toxoplasma gondii is a congenital infection passed from the mother, who acquired the acute infection during pregnancy, to the child, it will not be discussed. Look at the handout Appendix A, titled North Dakota's Big 5 Foodborne Illnesses. The North Dakota Food Code focuses mainly upon these 5 organisms that can invade the school food service: norovirus, hepatitis A, E. coli, Shigella, and Salmonella, and has guidelines and safeguards in place to assist in preventing the spread of foodborne illness in the food service environment. 3 of these made the CDC's Big 8: norovirus, E. coli, and Salmonella. The chart lists the symptoms, source of foods that provide a fertile environment for the organisms to grow and spread, as well as how to control the spread of these organisms. Please take a minute to read over the handout. Now look at handout Appendix B, Common Foodborne Illnesses, Symptoms and Prevention. The chart on Appendix B gives the symptoms of and prevention information for microorganisms that are known causes of foodborne illness, as well as where the microorganism can be found. If the rectangle in the first column is highlighted, that particular microorganism is one of the CDC's Big 8. If the rectangle in the second, third, and fourth columns are highlighted, that microorganism is one of the North Dakota Food Code Big 5 microorganisms. Take a minute to look over the information, after which you will do an activity to practice thinking about the symptoms and foods related to common foodborne illnesses. Using the Common Foodborne Illnesses, Symptoms and Prevention handout as a reference, determine which illness you think has occurred in each scenario. Scenario number 1. Susan. Susan woke up one morning feeling dizzy and weak. She has had diarrhea for the past couple of days. She went to the doctor, and he suspected a foodborne illness. He asked her to tell him what she had eaten over the past several days. He became concerned when she told him that she had eaten some stew that a friend had canned last fall. What type of foodborne illness would you suspect she might have? Botulism is most likely the illness for Susan, who ate the home canned stew. The reason is that her symptoms are consistent with botulism, including dizziness and weakness. She became ill within 18 to 36 hours after consuming the product, and she ate a home canned food. Next one, scenario number 2, Brenda and John. Brenda and John attended a hamburger fry at the local park, a fundraiser for a local charity. At the time they ate their hamburgers, Brenda mentioned to John that they looked a little rare, but they sure did taste good. 3 days later, both Brenda and John were experiencing severe cramping and bloody diarrhea. What type of foodborne illness would you suspect? E. coli is the most likely cause of their illness. The reason is that their symptoms are consistent with E. coli, including severe diarrhea and abdominal cramps. The onset of symptoms was between 3 to 8 days, and they ate undercooked hamburger meat. Next, scenario number 3, Judy and Ashley. Judy and Ashley ate lunch at a local restaurant. The fruit plate looked so good that they both ordered one. A variety of fruits were served in a cantaloupe half with the rind on. The next morning, Ashley called Judy and told her that she was not feeling well. Judy was surprised because she too was feeling ill, with a fever, stomach cramps, and a headache. They wondered if it could be something they had eaten. What do you think it could have been? Salmonellosis is the likely cause. The reason is that their symptoms are consistent with salmonellosis, including fever, stomach cramps, and headache. The onset of symptoms was between 6 and 48 hours, and they had eaten fresh cantaloupe that still had the rind attached. Last one, scenario number 4, Cook's Choice. It was Cook's Choice Day at the local school, so the cook decided to clean out the freezer and found some turkey and gravy that had been cooked earlier in the school year. She decided to make up some mashed potatoes and serve the reheated turkey and gravy over the potatoes. The next day, over 20 children were absent from school, with parents reporting their children had severe diarrhea and abdominal cramps. What bacteria do you think might be the culprit? Clostridium perfringens is the likely cause. The reason is that their symptoms are consistent with perfringens, including severe diarrhea and abdominal cramps. The onset of symptoms was between 8 and 24 hours, and the food involved was a leftover turkey and gravy product that might not have been cooled properly or reheated properly. The handouts contain important information for you to know and should give you an inkling of how essential it is to be aware of the ways to prevent the growth of pathogens, contamination, and the spread of foodborne illness. Under ideal conditions, bacteria can double every 10 to 30 minutes. One cell can increase to more than 16 million in 8 hours. Several factors are involved in the growth of microorganisms. Factors that influence bacterial growth are food, acidity, time, temperature, oxygen, and moisture. Let's talk about each of these factors and how they affect bacterial contamination of food. Food. Food is important because it provides the protein and carbohydrates that bacteria need to grow. High protein foods are generally responsible for most foodborne illnesses. All animal products are potentially hazardous. Some vegetables and plant products may also be hazardous once they are cooked. This is because cooking destroys protective barriers in plants and converts proteins and carbohydrates into a form more usable by microorganisms. This makes vegetables and plant products such as potatoes, tofu, beans, winter squash, and rice potentially hazardous once they are cooked. Acidity. At the proper acidity level, bacteria can grow rapidly. You may have heard of the term pH, which is how acidity is measured. At a neutral pH between 4.6 and 7.0, bacteria will thrive. In environments of high acidity, pH below 4.6, bacteria do not grow well. In an alkaline environment, pH between 7.0 and 9.0, bacteria can survive, although they do not grow rapidly. Generally, we do little to control the acidity of a food, but manufacturing ingredients such as citric acid can be added to create a more acidic food. Temperature. Temperature is a very important factor for bacterial growth, and one that we can control in a school nutrition operation. Bacteria grow very rapidly when they are in a warm environment. The temperature danger zone is 41 degrees Fahrenheit to 135 degrees Fahrenheit. Because bacteria grow so rapidly in the temperature danger zone, we emphasize the need to keep food out of the temperature danger zone as much as possible. Time. Time and temperature are highly related. When we talk about temperature, we often note times. For example, reheat food to 165 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 seconds. Cook hamburger patties to 155 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 seconds. Cool food down from 135 degrees Fahrenheit to 70 degrees Fahrenheit in 2 hours or less. It is important to minimize the time that food is in the temperature danger zone. You want to make sure that the heating process is adequate to kill bacteria. Oxygen. There are two types of bacteria: aerobic ones that need oxygen to grow, and anaerobic ones that do not need oxygen to grow. Clostridium perfringens and Clostridium botulism, listed in the Common Foodborne Illness handout, are two bacteria that grow in an environment without oxygen. One of the hazardous foods for Clostridium botulism is home canned foods. Canned foods do not have oxygen, so Clostridium botulism can grow easily. When foods are canned, proper methods must be used to ensure that the temperatures are hot enough to kill any bacteria in the food. Moisture. Moisture is the last factor to support growth of bacteria. Bacteria get nutrients from water solutions. Most fresh foods have high enough water content to support bacterial growth. Some dry foods, such as rice or beans, become potentially hazardous in the cooking process once moisture is added. Sugar products, cereal products, dried fruits, jams, and jellies have low moisture levels and are therefore resistant to bacteria. Each of the 6 factors can be controlled in a school nutrition operation, especially when you know how each factor can impact bacterial growth. Controlling food, temperature, and time are the highest priority areas for school nutrition staff. If a foodborne illness occurred in your school or center, how would you respond? Keep your cool. Don't panic. Keep an investigative head. There are a lot of reasons students and children may not be feeling well other than eating your food. Remaining calm will help you respond rationally to the situation and may help everyone involved from overreacting. Talk to your supervisor immediately. Do not avoid panic and sympathy symptoms. Ask the principal and teacher not to discuss the problems with anyone except the school nurse. Preserve the evidence. You should keep samples of all potentially hazardous foods served in your facility in the refrigerator or freezer for 48 hours. Gather information. Write down the name and the phone number of anyone who is experiencing symptoms. Find out the date and time they ate your food. Trace the handling of all items on the menu in case there is indeed a foodborne illness. Find out what was on the menu and how the foods were handled before and during preparation. Report your results. Report all the information you have gathered to your supervisor and principal, regardless of whether it is a good report or not. Secure treatment immediately. People with symptoms of foodborne illness should seek professional medical care immediately, particularly if symptoms are severe or if the victim is quite young, pregnant, elderly, or has a chronic illness. Take every report of possible foodborne illness seriously and follow the appropriate steps. It is better to be safe than sorry. One of the greatest priorities in the food service industry is to keep food safe for people to eat. Therefore, it is vital that food service employees learn and practice sanitary procedures that will result in healthful food for the customer. It's time to give you the second digit of the training code. Grab your pencil and paper and write down a lowercase r. Take a little time to review what you've learned in this lesson by answering these 6 questions. Here are the answers. How did you do? Please click on this link to go to lesson number 2, the Safe Food Handler.